Hello there, I'm Black Bright News, and today I wanted to talk about, those warnings that we're getting about the heat. So I wanted to talk about that, and yeah, I don't want to waffle or go off track, so I'm going to read from my notes. But first, can I ask you a question? When was the last time you actually read one of those official warnings that come out? Well, this morning I saw one about the heat, and to be honest, I glanced at the subject and I skipped over it. I opened the email. I saw the words significant impacts, capacity, service demand, operational resilience. And before I'd reached the fourth bullet point, I'd mentally wandered off to wondering whether I'd remembered to take something out of the freezer for my lunch. I don't think I'm unusual. I think millions of us do exactly the same thing, not because we're careless or disinterested, but because somewhere between the experts writing the message and ordinary people reading it, the human being disappears. So today I thought I would do what we always do here on Black Bright News. Let's translate the heat warning into ordinary English, not government English, people English. Because when the weather gets very hot, it isn't the sunshine that's the problem. It's the way heat quietly changes people. That's what I don't think we always appreciate. Cold weather usually announces itself. You know you're cold. You put a jumper on, you make a cup of tea, you switch the heating on. Heat is different. Heat is polite. It doesn't bang on your front door, it quietly lets itself in. You feel a little bit more tired than usual. You have a slight headache. You tell yourself you're probably just a bit run down. You become irritable. You don't feel like eating. You keep saying, I'll get a drink in a minute. Then a minute becomes an hour. And before you know it, your body has been trying to tell you something for quite a while. I found myself asking, why do we hear about schools closing because it's too hot, yet adults still go to work? That doesn't make sense to me. If schools were not on half term, they would probably be closed. Not because it's too hot, which is what I thought, but because of something quite interesting. There isn't a law that says once it reaches a certain temperature, everyone has to stop working or children must be sent home. Instead, the law asks a different question. Can people still work safely? Can people learn safely? At first, I thought that English could wriggle itself out of a beanbag with its ambiguities because apparently there's a difference between saying a school closed because it was too hot and saying the law made the school close because it was too hot. Those two sentences sound almost identical, but they're not. That's probably why lawyers always ask for clarity, while the rest of us think we're having one conversation. So back to the heat warning. Hot weather doesn't affect everybody equally. If you're 25, fit and healthy, and sitting in an air-conditioned office, you'll probably cope pretty well. If you're laying bricks on a roof, driving a bus all day, working 12 hours on a hospital ward, caring for the elderly people in a care home, delivering parcels, collecting rubbish, standing in a factory, or living in a block of flat that traps heat, it's a completely different experience. So then I started thinking about the elderly gentleman who says he's fine because he doesn't want to bother anyone, the neighbour who always insists she doesn't need any help, the mum who's trying to keep 3 children entertained during the school holidays while the house feels like an oven, the man who decides to mow the lawn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because it'll only take 20 minutes, the teenager who jumps into a river to cool down without realising how dangerous cold water shock can be. This is no longer about weather. It's about what people do when the weather is hot. And this is why those official warnings that many of us ignore matter. Not because somebody's in an office, not because somebody in an office has decided to spoil our day or our summer, but because every single one of those situations happens somewhere to somebody every time we have a prolonged spell of hot weather. The difficulty is that official organisations have to write for systems. They have to think about hospitals, ambulances, electricity, medicines, transport, staffing, water. That's their job. My job, if you'll allow me, is slightly different. I'm talking to you. I'm talking about someone you love. It might be a parent, a grandparent, an elderly neighbour, a friend who insists on carrying on as though nothing is wrong. Because hospitals don't suddenly become busy by themselves. People become unwell. Ambulances don't suddenly become overwhelmed. Families make frightened phone calls. Those headlines we read always begin somewhere very ordinary. A headache, a dizzy spell, a forgotten glass of water, a decision to keep working just a little bit longer. And that's why I think these warnings serve at least a first look and maybe reinforced by a second glance. Not because we should all become frightened every time the sun comes out. Quite the opposite. Enjoy the sunshine, sit in the garden, take the grandchildren to the park, have a barbecue, live your life. Just don't underestimate what the heat can quietly do while you're busy enjoying yourself. Drink before you're thirsty. Check on somebody who lives alone. Take a break if you're working outside. If someone tells you they don't feel quite right, don't dismiss it as, oh, it's only the heat. Sometimes it is the heat, and that's the point. Official organisations have to speak the language of systems. Perhaps that's unavoidable, but behind every official warning is somebody's ordinary Tuesday. Somebody's mum, somebody's husband, somebody's child, somebody's friend. And once we remember that, those emails suddenly become a lot easier to understand. So like I said, I had a habit of just glossing over them and thinking, oh, what's it got to do with me? I still have to come into work. They don't really care about me. They send those emails, but I still have to go into work and I still, you know what I mean? I become a victim. Because sometimes when you hear the warnings about how hot it's going to be, well, for me, I immediately think, well, if they're warning us that it's going to be hot, to me, that means it's going to be dangerous. So why do I still have to go into work? That's my logic. But from their perspective, as I just shared with you, it's about keeping us safe. If we can go into work and there's air conditioning, regardless of how hot it is outside, and, they've got, fans running and they're filling the fridge with water, which is what they're doing. So there's plenty of water for us to drink. That they're doing the best to reduce risk. But from our standpoint, when if you have to get a bus and you're getting on the bus and it's hot and it's stuffy, or you're in your car and even it takes so long for the air conditioning to come on, and even when you get in your car you can't even hold the steering wheel, it's so hot, the seats are so hot. So it's such an ordeal to actually get out to go to work in the first place. So I do understand to a degree why the warnings come out, and we also have to be responsible for ourselves and those who are close to us during this period. Make sure we don't underestimate the heat. Sometimes, like I said, I'm here and it feels stuffy, my nose feels blocked, so I know that that's the heat outside. And I've tried closing the blinds because that's what they say. If you close the blind, it deflects the heat. So you must just try to do whatever it is you can do when it's hot like this. Find the coolest place in your home or the coolest place in your office. Drink plenty of water. Rest. You don't necessarily have to go out in the sun unless you want to. But if you do, I saw something, yesterday about don't go and sit underneath trees. I mean, people go under the trees for shade, but apparently they might catch fire or something. So, I don't know. I think it's probably best just to stay in a safe place where as cool as possible. If you've got one of those fans or those little air conditioners, those portable ones that they're doing now, get one of those and try to keep yourself cool. And that's all I've got to say for now. Bye-bye.